Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, welcome for the first time. And if you are a returning viewer, welcome back again. My name is Cori of Coriander Quilts, and today I am going to be sharing with you some of my favorite tools and tips for piecing small blocks. Now, I don't know how many of you are participating in the Socialite Sew Along that begins very soon. These are little blocks from the last round of Socialites, and as you can see, these are some small blocks. Now, I really enjoy piecing small blocks. I think it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the fun of getting everything nice and accurate and having my seams line up just right, but it can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you approach it in a way that isn't conducive to accuracy. So I do have some things that I always utilize and some methods that I like to use for piecing these small blocks. Now, the Socialites Quilt Along, you can make your blocks in this 3-inch size, but you also have the option for piecing 6 or 9-inch sized blocks. So we do have some options. And if you're not familiar with that sew along, I am going to link to that down below. But regardless of whether you are participating in that specific sew along, there will probably come a time in your piecing, or maybe not, but most likely when you will want to piece something that might be smaller than is within your usual comfort level of piecing. And there are some different things that you can do that will make things simpler. So down below me here, I have kind of my variety of tools that I like to use for piecing small blocks. And I'm going to talk about some of these different things. Number one, Faultless spray starch. Now, you have probably heard about starching fabrics if you've been quilting for any length of time. And I'm talking specifically about pre-starching fabrics prior to cutting anything apart for your quilt block. And this is called pre-starching. And you can find out more about this technique by going on to Lisa Bongean's YouTube channel, as well as Kimberly Jolly's YouTube channel. Both of them have shared in the past their exact technique for pre-starching their fabrics before they cut their fabrics out. Kimberly learned from Lisa, I learned from Lisa, and this is a technique that I always use whenever I am piecing something small. I don't typically pre-starch my fabrics unless I'm doing 6-inch blocks or smaller. So 3-inch definitely fits the bill for pre-starching my fabrics. I'm not going to go into detail about the method of pre-starching because there's a lot of really great information already out there on how to do that, but I will link to the videos that show exactly how I would go about pre-starching my fabrics for piecing small blocks as shared by Lisa and Kimberly. So spray starch is a must-have in my opinion, pre-starching a must-do for piecing small blocks. Good rulers to prevent slipping when you are cutting your fabrics. I really like these Quilters Select rulers. I have a lot of different rulers that I like using, but these are definitely the grippiest of all of the rulers that I have tried. And they come in a variety of sizes, and I really like using them for small piecing. If you have a favorite ruler that's nice and grippy, that's what you're going to want for small piecing. In the same idea, cutting fabrics, a nice rotary cutter is going to be great. Now, I am a 60mm rotary cutter all the way. I use my 60mm for just about everything. It seems most piecers, quilt makers, prefer a 45mm for cutting their fabrics, but I love a 60mm. But for small piecing, I often reach for this 28. So it's a very small size, you can see that here. And I find that I can cut those small pieces more accurately. So this is probably between this and the 45. I probably use my 28 just a little bit more when I'm piecing small blocks. Pins, we want some good pins. I am not a pinner, so I don't often pin unless I need to, but with small blocks, I do find that I need to pin, and I like a good pin, one that goes through the pieces easily, and also one that's not super long. When I am piecing larger blocks, I like a longer pin to pin those pieces if I need to, but for small patchwork, I prefer a shorter pin. So here we have some little house pins right here. These glide really nicely into your fabrics. And I also have a magic pin, and I have several, but I just tucked one into this little pin cushion. I have actually more than several. I have a lot of magic pins, but I like this little guy too. It is a thicker pin, but the head is so nice to grasp when I need to pin something quickly. So I will link to both of those pins down below, but a good pin. I think as quilters, we probably all have our favorite pins. These are ones that I prefer for small piecing specifically. Moving on from pins, let's talk about threads. So a finer thread, a finer weight thread is going to give you more accurate piecing than a bulkier thread. A lot of people don't think about how much width, space that thread takes up within your patchwork project. But when we are working with super teeny little pieces, that thread can make a significant difference, especially if it's a bulkier thread. So I like to use a 50 weight thread. I use it for all of my piecing. It's a fine thread. I use Aurifil in the color 2021 for all of my piecing. And I buy my thread by the box because I go through it a lot. So a nice fine weight thread will make more difference than you think that it would in your project. What else do we want to talk about here? Let's talk about tailor's clappers. So these are tools that you can use to flatten the seams in your block. You can buy fancy tailor's clappers like what I have here. I'm going to link to the seller that I purchased this from. Very nice quality tailor's clapper, and it works wonderfully. But before I had purchased this tailor's clapper, I was using a cutoff piece of maple countertop wood that was left over from a kitchen remodel. It's not fancy, but it's nice and solid, and I could just set it right down on top of my blocks. For those of you not familiar with how a tailor's clapper works, once you have pressed your seam, you just set your clapper right down on your block and it flattens those seams as it cools off. So I would just press and then set my chunk of wood right on top of it, and it really flattened the seams. So maybe you don't have an actual tailor's clapper. Maybe you've had a kitchen remodel and you can use a chunk of wood from that to flatten your seams, but it does make a really nice flat block, more than you would think that it would make a difference. So, and you can buy an actual tailor's clapper from quilt shops. They're easy to come by, and it is a nice tool to add to your sewing supplies, but it doesn't have to be fancy. So that's another thing that I use. Pressing seams open on small blocks also makes the difference. I am very much a press to the side, nest those seams sort of girl, but pressing seams open does make for a very nice flat block. And it can also alleviate some of the bulk in your seams as they come together. In small piecing, you're going to notice bulk quicker, so you probably would press your seams open if you're doing a small patchwork. I do, as you can see here, prefer to press my seams open when I am making small patchwork pieces. And that's when the pinning comes in handy. And then of course, the tailor's clapper comes in handy for getting those seams nice and flat. I will say, as much as I like pressing to have nesting seams, blocks lay beautifully across the board when those seams are pressed open. So if you are a seam press opener, comment in the comments below and let us know, because I know that your blocks are looking sharp when you're pressing those all open. Let's see, next thing. Two more things I want to talk about here. Let's talk about this, because this might be a tip that you hadn't thought about. So a white on white fabric. Your background fabric that you're using for your blocks might be kind of an afterthought because you're choosing your prints, you're choosing your colors, because that is what is going to sparkle in your block. But if you choose a white on white fabric as opposed to a solid for your block background, the white on whites have a little bit more body in them than a solid will have, and they are just a crispier, I think as a quilter, you know what I'm talking about, a crispier finish when you press that into place. And so if I'm piecing small, I will often find myself reaching for a white on white fabric as opposed to just a solid fabric for my backgrounds, because it provides a crispier finish, and an easy thing to do, just to swap out those fabrics, but not something that a lot of people would consider because we want those prints to shine, so we're often thinking about them. But just know if you choose a white on white, it is going to give you a nice crisp finish when you're pressing those little pieces. So a white on white. And then the last thing I want to mention too is triangle paper. You can find tutorials for triangle paper all over YouTube. It's a really popular product to use. I don't use a lot of triangle paper in my half square triangles. I tend to make my half square triangles oversized and then trim them down. So I don't use a lot of them, but this is a nice product. If you're not familiar with it, definitely do a little YouTube searching so that you can see a triangle paper in action. This is a Primitive Gatherings triangle paper that I have here. And I like this one because it fits right on a charm pack. So that makes it really handy. There's lots of different methods of using, not even methods of using, I'm trying to think, lots of different varieties of triangle paper. Not all of them will fit onto a charm square. Some of them come on rolls, some of them come in larger sheets. So look for what works best for you. This is a fun one because, like I said, it fits onto a charm square just perfectly like that. And it is made specifically for charm squares. And these are 1/2 inch finished half square triangles. 1/2 inch finished. Yeah, when I said that, it didn't sound quite right. 1/2 inch finished half square triangles, but that is right. So those are such cute little half square triangles. So triangle paper is a definite wonderful product. Lots of people enjoy using triangle paper for piecing small pieces because it's so accurate and it's a wonderful product. So like I said, if you're not familiar with that one, be sure to search that out and see how that works because it's a really neat product. I think I'm looking over my list here to the side. Those are most of the things, all of the things that I had written down that I wanted to share with you about small piecing. So now I'm curious what things I didn't mention that you think are game changers for piecing those small squares. I know as quilters, we all have very specific items that we have to get the end product that we want. And it varies for each one of us. So I would love to hear what you think I should have included in my roundup. And that way, as people are reading down over the comments, they can be gathering even more information than what I shared here. I am also going to do up a little blog post over on my blog, corianderquilts.com, with this information so that if you didn't quite catch something, you can also go read a bit more about it over there. And of course, I will be listing everything in the description box below. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Let me know if you're participating in the Socialite Sew-Along or if you have any other fun sew-alongs that you are sewing with, and I will catch you again next time.